Okay, good evening and welcome to our third informational session on the Bridgewater School Project. My name is Lil Holbrook and I am a member of the School Building Committee, a school committee member and a former teacher. I actually was a teacher at the Mitchell School in 2015 when the roof collapsed. During our presentation tonight, you will be hearing from the following people. Mr. Michael Dolan, who is our Vice Chair of the School Building Committee, as well as the Vice Chair of School Committee. Mr. Derek Swenson, the Superintendent of Schools, and Mr. Gene Raymond. He's our architect from Raymond Designs. Other committee members in attendance tonight are Ms. Christina Oper, and she is our website designer from Daedalus. We also have with us somewhere, I don't know where he went, but John Bartetti from Raymond Designs. Also out in the hallway was Renee Rushton, who is also a member of the School Building Committee. We are very excited to have you here tonight to share with you the progress on the Mitchell School Building Project. Before we begin, we will ask that you please hold your questions until the end, as we have found through our previous presentations, many of your questions will be answered once all the presenters have had a chance to speak. Then you can ask as many questions as you would like. Thank you, and I will now turn it over to Mr. Michael Dolan.
Good evening, everybody. So microphones and podiums make me really nervous, so I'm going to stand to the side of it, if that's okay. Spin this way so you can hear me. So right off the bat, so I'm going to walk through where we've been, where we came from, and what got us to this point. So right off the bat, we all know, or most of us know, February 2015, the roof collapsed at Mitchell. I'm going to highlight some of these photos. This fancy dancy little clicker I have here. You can see pictures of the roof where it collapsed, and just the snow inside. We'll talk more about these two bottom pictures as we move through the presentation. So the collapse was in the center house, which is right there. The building is shaped like an E for those of you who may not remember that or know that. But those are some photos of the collapse. And this is the timeline. So if you look, you'll see February 17th was the day of the collapse. I'm certainly not going to read this entire slide to all of you. I will put you to sleep, guaranteed. So you'll see where we've been, where we're going. Big highlights, second one in is MSBA, February 15th of 2017. MSBA voted to take the Mitchell project into the eligibility phase. That's where we are moving through right now. We've hired a project team. Our project team consists of Daedalus, who is our owner's project manager. We, by Massachusetts standard, have to have one of those, OPM. They are there to work on our behalf through MSBA, and if and when we get to a building phase, they would act on our behalf as well with the builders. Feasibility study is where we are actually right now. It is not over. It says June to October of 2018. It's more present than October of 18. We're still moving through these phases. We, as a school committee, voted in October. Susan, October that whatever we decide as a community, the building known as the Mitchell School over on South Street will be a pre-K to 2 building. That decision was made again in the October meeting of our school committee. Moving through, the MSBA, this tells you who they are. Where they get their funding is through our sales tax. Everybody pays sales tax. They get a portion of that sales tax to cover their budget. So the 6.25% sales tax. The oversight, their board of directors, project managers, project coordinators, they will work with the building subcommittee. Sorry, Christine. Put that down to not break it. And they'll make sure that we as a community, we as a building school committee meet all of our required timelines. We fall into, we dot our I's, cross our T's, and make sure we do it right. This is the school building committee. Over on the left-hand side, you'll see the voting members. Over on the right-hand side, we have the non-voting members who work for the district. Those highlighted in yellow have construction background, whether construction itself, civil engineers, they run the gamut. So those are your school building committee members. Again, our OPM is Daedalus. They were hired through the feasibility study that we all entered and voted into in June of 16. Nope, I'm sorry, 17. June of 17, the town voted to move us in and fund the feasibility phase study. Daedalus was hired as part of that move. And then we went to Raymond Design for the architectural tasks. You'll recognize potentially Raymond Design. The school committee hired them just after the roof collapsed to do an analysis of the building and what we were looking at. And that's when we found all of the issues we found beyond the roof. We're going to collaborate with FSBA, so you'll see we've done preliminary design program. That's where we are right now. We've submitted that to MSBA, and that includes those bullets down there. The preliminary evaluation of alternatives. We've got a repair, an addition renovation, new construction at the existing site, and new construction at an alternative site. And you can see, here we go again. I did that wrong. There we go. So these are some of the, these pictures here on the right-hand side are all laid out here. So at the end, you can come up and take a look at those. I think that is where I hand it to Mr. Swenson.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for being here. Since the collapse of the roof in 2015, we are currently still in the same relocation phase that we were when we initially moved. Basically, what had happened at that point was that we had to figure out a plan to relocate 1,000 students from the Mitchell Elementary School on South Street and figure out a way to relocate them within the district. In order to do that, we also had to relocate our middle school students. And what ended up happening was the site that they are currently in, at Mitchell at the Middle, 166 Mount Prospect, was formerly the Bridgewater Middle School. So what we had to do was put a plan together with our administrative team, and we had to move rather quickly. By the grace of God, it happened over February vacation. No students were in that building, but it also gave us time to work with our administrative team, our teachers, our support staff, members of the school committee, and members of the communities of both Bridgewater and Raynham. And we were able to do miracle work and relocate all of these students to these different sites within 4 days, which is pretty remarkable. To this day, our pre-K students that were once housed at 500 South Street are now housed at the Raynham Middle School. Our grades K through 3 are currently housed at 166 Mount Prospect, the former middle school. We then relocated our 7th grade teams to the Williams Intermediate School, where at that point was housing just grades 4 through 6, so we actually had to put in an additional 200 students into that site. And our 8th grade students came over here to the high school. Now, many people may look at that and say, oh, it's working. I can tell you this much. It's working because we have an incredible team, we have incredible teachers, We have incredible support staff, paraprofessionals, custodians, cafeteria workers, everyone's hands-on. But when you think about it, we're putting pre-K students into a middle school. Anyone who's ever walked into a bathroom in a middle school will know that it was not, and it is not, conducive to a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old. We have now our K-3 students in a former high school. Again, facilities, different things along those lines are not conducive to that population. We have an additional grade level in a school that was only comprised for 3 grade levels. So space has become an issue. And here at the high school, we have taken over the entire 3rd floor of this building, which has created a lot of relocation issues for our high school staff and also limited us in some of the offerings we can now offer our high school students. So this is a pretty swift and effective short-term solution, but definitely not a long-term solution. With that being said, as Mr. Dolan just stated, that at the October 24th school committee meeting, the committee decided to move forth with my recommendation with a pre-K2 configuration. We had to provide the MSBA with 2 choice configurations. One was a pre-K2, the other was the existing pre-K3. The reason why I feel, and members of the committee feel, that the pre-K2 model works for us as a district is that currently, if anyone knows and thinks regionally like I do about our district, we are very, in terms of grade alignment, disconfigured. On the Bridgewater side, our elementary is pre-K3. We have an intermediate school, that's 4-6. We have a middle school, that's 7-8, and then the high school. On the Raynham side, you have an elementary school, that's K1. You have another elementary school that is 2 through 4, no intermediate school, and the middle school is 5 through 8. So if we want to think regionally like we should in a regional district, we're going to make sure that our grade alignments are equitable. Because when your grade alignments are equitable, the program delivery of services is then equitable. What the pre-K2 model gives us, we start to be able to realign our district so that it becomes more equitable on both sides of the district. And I'll show you in a little bit what I mean by that. In 2014, again, we had the model of pre-K3, the Williams Intermediate School, 4 through 6, Bridgewater Middle School, 7-8, high school, 9 through 12. With this reconfiguration, we would have a pre-K2 model on the Bridgewater side. The intermediate school would then become 3 through 5, and the middle school would then become grades 6 through 8, which somewhat more aligns with the Raynham model of 5 through 8. So again, we're trying to do a grade alignment across the district so that in the end, we can create equity across the district in terms of programmatic delivery and delivery of services. When we talk about the feasibility stage, and we're talking about what we're trying to determine throughout this stage, is that we're trying to find the most educational appropriate, flexible, sustainable, and cost-effective solution for an addition, renovation, or new construction of the Mitchell Elementary School. When we talk about that, we have to take into consideration building a site that is and can continue to meet our enrollment. If anybody knows that on both sides of our district currently, there's a great deal of construction going on both sides of the district. This is increasing our student population, especially at the K4 population. Just met with Mr. Bray this morning about his budget for next year. He is already putting in an additional teacher at every grade level. Since the beginning of the school year, he's had an average of anywhere from 12 to 17 students per grade level move into the district. So when we're creating these sites, we need to make sure that we're taking into account and meeting our enrollment requirements. It also has to meet the educational program, which we'll talk about in a little bit. A 21st century educational program is much different than it was when that site down on 500 South Street was first created. We'll talk a little bit about that and how the programmatic issues will drive the construction of that building. Improvements of accessibility and safety. As Mr. Dolan just showed you, the current configuration of that building is E-shaped. There are 3 separate entryways to that building, and that is definitely a safety issue for us. We want to create one central location that's an entry and exit way so that we can monitor people who are coming in through the buildings. Increased efficiency in air quality systems. Anyone who knows that building knows the history, and that there were definitely some HVAC issues that led to some issues with air quality. Many people refer to it as a sick building. There were some issues that were documented that are related to some of the air quality issues in there with our staff and students. Age-appropriate playgrounds and recess facilities. We want to make sure, obviously, that this is a site that not only has an infrastructure inside, but outside that can accommodate our little ones. Infrastructure for modern technology requirements. When this building was originally constructed back in the 90s, there was no such thing as wireless remoting and whatnot. So right now, we want to make sure that if we want to go to a one-to-one model at some point, that we have a strong infrastructure that can support those type of initiatives. And creating space for the whole community. As you know, our schools are not school buildings, they are town-owned buildings. So any given time you come here on the weekends, we have biddy basketball, we have Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts using our site. So we want to make sure that we're creating a building that can accommodate all of our community and function as a community center throughout. When we talk about 21st century learning environments, many people just kind of focus on technology. Technology obviously is a big part of a 21st century learning environment, but there are some guiding design principles that we want to create within our buildings, because 21st century learning environments are more than just technology. It's about collaboration, creativity, and really helping our students become effective in a global economy. So a lot of the new innovations and creativity that we want to put into our buildings provide spaces outside of the classroom so that the entire building is a learning environment. Having things such as STEAM and STEM rooms, maker mark spaces that have a focus with more project-based assessment rather than just paper pencil, time for collaboration with classmates and other students throughout the building. We want to make sure that these spaces are flexible and adaptable, meaning that 10, 15 years from now, if the direction of public education changes, that we don't have to build a new building. That we have built a building that is flexible enough to adapt to the needs and trends that are coming down the pipe. We also want to create what are called small school fields. A small school field. We want to make sure that we're creating what are called orbits, which is having all of our kindergarten classrooms clustered together, all of our first grade clustered together, second grade students. This allows time to limiting times on things such as transition for our staff when they're going to and from, especially staff that services the needs possibly across grade level, like a Title I teacher or a special ed teacher. So we want to make sure that it's kind of like more of a neighborhood feel for our individual grade levels, which right now, if you know from the original Mitchell, it was not always the case. One thing that we did over the summer, which I think was probably the best experience I've had throughout this, is that we participated in what's called visioning sessions. And this was comprised of administrators, teachers, community members. We actually had town council folks that were on this committee. And basically, we came together, we talked about what we envisioned a 21st century learning environment would be down at 500 South Street. And some of the things that I just talked about were discussed. We also were able to visit many schools throughout Massachusetts and New Hampshire that had new construction projects throughout. And we're able to see some of those things that we just talked about a little while ago, having STEM and STEAM opportunities for our students, make-a-mock spaces, having breakout spaces in our hallways so that if students had to have some direct instruction through a special ed teacher or Title I, they could go right outside the classroom in order to do so. Movable partitioned walls so that you could have collaboration between classrooms and larger group areas so you could have that community feel where an entire grade level can come together for some type of grade level activity. So these are all of the things that are going to tie in to our envisioning and our programmatic profile, which we submitted to MSBA. And this is what really drives where we're going to go in terms of what that building will be. And at the end of the presentation, I'd be happy to answer any specific questions in regards to the programmatic profile that we did submit back in November, back in October, to the MSBA. So with that, I'd like to introduce Gene Raymond from Raymond Designs, who is the lead architect on the project.
Thanks. So again, my name's Gene Raymond, and we've been involved in the district for a number of years now. We did a bunch of work in both Raynham and Bridgewater, I think in 2013 or 14, and then when the roof collapse happened in February of 15, as has been mentioned, we were hired to do what they call a forensic study on the school. All the kids had been moved out, and really everyone's number one question was, is the building safe? So we were hired at first to come in and do a structural analysis of the building, and I'll go through some of the things we found regarding that. But when we got engaged on the project, very quickly, Derek had mentioned that the building had, we heard for the first time, the building had a history of kind of air quality issues. And so as we were going through and figuring out what it would take to structurally reinforce or replace the roof, we said, geez, we really have to look at this air quality issue, because if you're going to spend millions of dollars fixing up the structure, you don't want to be left with a problem still lingering regarding air quality. And I'll go through what we found. We found that, and then the third issue that kind of immediately we heard also was, geez, if you're going to look at options for this building and apply to the MSBA for a project, the other thing that's been a problem on this site since day one has been the site circulation. So traffic on the site. Let's see. There we go. I might go to a laser pointer, but so this is. Can everyone see that all right? Is that all right? So as Derek had mentioned, the school is in the shape of kind of a backwards E, and I'm sure the original design intent was to break down this big school, because it had over 1,000 kids in it, and into maybe 3 smaller learning environments, which Derek talked about is a goal for this project as well. So they kind of broke it down into houses, South House, Center House, and North House, and they all had their own front door, and a couple of them had their own principal's offices, and a couple had nurses. And then all the core facilities, the cafeteria and the gymnasiums and the kitchen, were kind of in the back. So they'd all feed into the shared facility and then go back into their wing. So that's fine, and it's appropriate to try to break down a big school from a learning perspective. But one of the things that you'll see we're going to try to address is not from a safety perspective, is trying to link these and have one centralized entrance. When it came to site circulation, when this was an operating school, we've shown parents stacking up, when they're dropping off or picking up in this kind of dashed line here. And we figured that on site, so getting off the street, you can fit 30, 40 cars at the most kind of waiting and dropping kids off before then circling back through the parking lot, because there's only one entry and exit out onto South Street. When we looked at the current operation, Mitchell at the middle, so what's going on at 166 Mount Prospect Street, we calculated there's about 110 cars that stack. So, you know, traffic, and this was, again, something we were told, out on South Street was an issue. Then you had parents coming in and trying to get back out. And then in yellow, you had buses kind of circumnavigating the parking lot and then going around the building. There's about 23 buses for 1,000 kids school, and then they too were going out at South Street. So all the, you know, kind of site circulation, air quality, structural issues, you know, we are looking at what we can do with this building as far as an addition renovation option going forward, but those are areas that we'll have to address. I guess I'll click. Is everyone familiar? There's play fields out back. There's kind of a stream running through the site. So we have some wetlands restrictions. The playgrounds are over on this side. The area up in here is higher. So when you come into the upper level of the building, and then you go down, and this part of the site is lower, so you come out at the lower side. The senior center is out behind the building, and then Route 18 and Bedford Street is over on the right side. Because we're gonna touch on those when we go through various options. So the roof collapse, when we took a look at the structure, it occurred in this classroom in the corner here at Center House, and obviously it was open to the air. We went through. The building has a steel frame, but it goes up and it just stops. And then on top of that, there's wood trusses that form the pitched roofs. So there's every line you see here going left to right is an individual wood truss. There's actually 3 trusses that make up each roof section. The issue was that there was a real quality control and an installation issue with the wood trusses. We did go up and touch every single truss in the building up in the attic, and all these areas that are highlighted in yellow we felt were unsafe and could be subject to collapse, and if you had kids back in there, you'd have to shore up the roof. So that was one issue, the structure. When it was open to the air, it was winter. So then all this cold air got into the building, pipes froze, they had all sorts of leaks, and there was all sorts of destruction, which we'll show you some pictures of too. But this is an example of one truss that's, you know, snapped right in half, and I can't tell you how many pictures of various trusses we have with damage like that. The other thing is, because they're very narrow members, they have to stand up perfectly plumb. And if they rack a little bit, then they lose their structural capacity. So it's probably hard to see, but there's a bunch of green tags. And everywhere there's a green tag, there's supposed to be a 2x4 or a 2x6 running the length of the roof. And for some reason, you know, those were either missing or installed incorrectly. So we had taken a look at, can we just go back in and repair all the trusses and put in all the required bracing? And it actually turned out, because you're working in confined space, to be more expensive. Our recommendation was that the roof just be taken off and a new roof be put back on. Now, the other issue, we started to think about air quality, but during that winter, I mean, a lot of people had ice damming. We started to look at how the building was constructed. And, you know, they had insulation in the outside wall, they had insulation kind of up in the roof, but where the two met, the insulation was compressed down to a couple inches. And when insulation gets compressed, it loses pretty much all of its insulation value. So you had a lot of heat going out of here, melting snow, and then freezing again at night when it got cold, and that's what causes all these icicles. So between the broken pipes that burst, and then all these ice dams kind of running, you know, the water just streaming down the walls, This is a picture in one of the wings, and much of the school in its current condition doesn't have any drywall because it's all water damaged. There were flooding on the floor, so they had to remove drywall down in the basement. The air quality issue turned out to be a fairly fairly simple issue to diagnose, but it's an expensive one to fix. The building's a brick building, and people think of brick and they think, okay, it's really solid and it's waterproof and all that, but to be honest, brick is very porous, and mortar joints are very porous. So when it's wet, when it gets wet, that water inevitably gets drawn kind of into the building. And people know that, designers know that. So behind brick, there's usually an airspace of an inch or a couple inches so that any water that comes in will just fall down. And then at the bottom, you have open joints in the brick and the water can get back out outside. What we found was that at the bottom of the cavity, so any water that was getting sucked into this brick was falling down, and it should have been able to get out of the building. Instead, the cavity and the kind of the openings where the water would go back out were all filled with mortar droppings from when they constructed the brick wall. So we opened up some walls from inside the building, and that's the back side of the brick, and the cavity's just full. So what was happening and needs to be corrected is there was a lot of moisture inside all those walls. It's not coming up from the floor. We took cuts down through the floor. The concrete was dry. There was crushed stone. There were vapor barriers. So the solution, unfortunately, is like the roof, is to remove the entire exterior skin of the building and go back in and put a proper membrane and insulation and rebuild it so that you can control the water. So that all that water was getting kind of sucked into the building and causing a lot of condensation, a lot of humidity, and leading to health issues. So that's, those are the issues that we see, and as I said, we are going to look at addition renovation options. Sorry about that. So one of the questions was, and we have to satisfy not only the state funding agency, MSBA, but also people in the town. Is the Mitchell School site, never mind the building, is that the best place to build a new pre-K2 school, whether it's an addition, renovation, or a new school? So the town provided us with a number of sites in town that were 5 acres or more. 5 acres is probably the minimum size, that were publicly owned. And we took a look at, this is where the Mitchell is. We took a look at the Legion Field and the Williams, the Bridgewater, the former middle school at 166 Mount Prospect. We even looked at some options out behind the high school. And then we looked at 2 town-owned parcels on Cherry Street and East Street over by Halifax. And we ran them through a matrix, how do the sites impact traffic, neighborhoods, are there wetlands on the site, how's the permitting going to be, et cetera, et cetera. So I just want to run you through some of the due diligence that this committee did on other sites before they landed back at the Mitchell. So we took a look at putting an addition out behind the Williams School, which would have made a pre-K through either 5 or 6. It would have been a very large school, but again, we could have tried to break it up into 2 schools that maybe shared some facilities. Unfortunately, the Williams site's pretty small, so we ended out onto Legion Field. We also looked at just putting a whole brand new separate school out onto Legion Field. And Legion Field's a public park, so never mind kind of the local issues. It's, as a park, it has certain rights that are granted by the Commonwealth. If the town decided that was the place to build a school, they would need to get permission from the state legislature to use it. And as part of that, typically you end up replicating what you have taken away somewhere else in town. So it becomes politically an issue, timing-wise an issue, and expense-wise, because you have to rebuild fields somewhere else. The 166 Mount Prospect, where Mitchell is now, the former middle school, we took a look at building a 3-story, that's about all we could fit. It's a 3-story L-shaped new school out behind, kind of where the football field is. But kind of right around the corner, this is the high school site. And so down in the high school, we took a look at putting a building out behind the high school. And all these sites, as part of the due diligence, we ran them by public safety people. So we met with the police department and fire department. And on these 2 sites, they said, please don't put another school there. There's so much traffic in that area right now. It's really going to get clogged up, and it's going to be, besides an inconvenience, it's going to be a safety issue. East Street, we looked at, and Cherry Street. I'm going to apologize. One of these is also a parkland. I think it's the Cherry Street lot, if I remember correctly. And then East Street had a wetland, and you'd have to cross a wetland. But really, kind of one of the big issues here is there's no sewage up in that part of town. So to provide a sewage plant up there or extend a line is just a huge expense. So kind of given all that, it was fairly simple for the committee to say, you know, the Mitchell site is where we ought to be looking. So as I said, we'll go through it. We looked at addition renovations, and we looked at new construction. We also looked at putting it out in one of those play fields near the senior center. And we actually looked at, hey, what if we took the senior center and we built a new one over here? And this one, beyond the expense of building and the time required to build a new senior center, was a very easy one to eliminate. And then this one, we just felt we were way too close to the senior center and kind of impinging on their program. So what MSBA requires is, even though you probably won't end up doing it, is what would it cost just to repair the building and put it back together the way it is. So that's where you have to think of Derek and what's a 21st century education, what are safety issues, what are site circulation issues. But what we have to show them is it would be the exact same footprint, the exact same layout inside. You know, you just have the same one entrance and exit. And I forget what the number was on this, but I think it was over $30 million or around $27 million cost to the town. And that would probably be 100% on you. The state probably would not participate in that kind of educational program. So the next, we looked at 2 addition renovations options. So the backwards E is right here. And what we did is we have all sorts of space that needs to be in this building given the educational program and the visioning that isn't there now. So we end up with an addition. We have more square footage than exists in the building. And what we did is we chose to use that to start to connect a couple of these legs of the E and then create one central entrance. We also, even though we didn't need the space, we created a corridor here just to, right now everyone's isolated. Like if you're here and there's a problem over here, you've got to kind of go this way and over here. And it's even worse here because if you're on the upper floor, you have to go downstairs, across, and then back upstairs to get here. So what we did is we took a look at connecting these and then putting a corridor here on the upper level also, just so from a safety perspective, you have a single entrance and you can flow around the building a lot easier. So it's safety, but it's also educational effectiveness. We also, in this yellow line, as part of this, we would be doing something on the site so that perhaps we wind cars down here and then wind them back up. because we're trying to get cars off the street at South Street. And we still have to deal with buses, but one of the other things that we are really very seriously looking at, or the committee is putting some sort of connection back out to Route 18, which will provide a second way in an emergency situation to get onto the site, which is very important if there was an incident at your single entrance. And it also will allow us, maybe parents can circulate here, and maybe buses can come in, but instead of going back out and creating a traffic bottleneck, maybe the buses can go out this way and take a right-hand turn on Route 18 and try to get the site to flow a little bit better. As far as organizing the school, as Derek said, the idea is going to be to break this down. Again, it's still a large school. It's close to 1,000 pupils. Break it down into smaller pods or smaller neighborhoods, which is better from an educational perspective. So, kind of in the north house, we might put a series of classrooms for lower floor and upper floor for second grade, a couple series in center house for first grade. Maybe the pre-K could be down on the lower level, maybe with its own entrance, and then kindergarten, and maybe it has its own entrance during drop-off and pickup too. But we're trying to create pods. And then whether it's new or addition renovation, so in this case it's a renovation and addition, we're thinking about what we can do to connect this pod to that pod. And maybe it involves opening up some floors and having some places like outside this room where you can look down into the other floor levels. This is the exact same floor layout, and the committee's studying two different options that really have the same floor plan. One would bring the entire structure of the building up to the most current structural code, which we're in what they call the 9th edition of the Massachusetts State Building Code. The original building in 1996 was designed around the 5th edition. We are not required, if we're careful about what we do, to bring the whole building up to the current standards. And really the difference is going to be in how well they resist a wind event or an earthquake where the building might rock a little bit. But the structural engineering community recognizes that the building's not unsafe if it's built to the 6th edition. It's just that as they learn more about things, the codes tend to tighten. So the difference is, it could be a $3 or $4 million difference if we just kind of restore the building back to the way it should have been under the 6th edition, and then build the additions under the most current edition, as opposed to building the whole thing under the most current edition. Keep doing that, Christina. So it's the same slide, and it's the same plan organization. So I'll skip to this one, which is what if you want to do a new school? And again, we looked at all the sites. This was the site to do it on. So the existing Mitchell is in this area, and given the topography with the hillside, it really makes sense just to stay in this area. It's going to be hard to have a building kind of straddle here and have an upper level and a 2-story over here. So we're looking at, in this scenario, all the core facilities might be right at the front door, kind of like this building. The admin controls the entrance, your gym, your library, your cafeteria, and your kitchen. Maybe they're all in the middle, and we create some wings. So maybe you have a kindergarten wing over here, and you have a first grade wing over here, and you have kind of some support services. But it's almost like the original Mitchell in that we're trying to break the wings down and then have people feed in to the core and then go back to their wings, which are smaller scale. So in this would be the lowest level, the South Street level, and then maybe, in this scenario, this was done when it was pre-K 3, we were looking at a second floor facing South Street. But again, the main entry, all the core facilities, and then creating these pods. So one of the differences, with the addition renovation, we'll do our best to implement the educational program and make it as flexible as possible. Obviously, one of the benefits of a new construction like this building is you can really customize a building to be flexible and to have those amenities that are community-oriented and educationally appropriate. So the building committee went through, and we had 6 various options. One was at repair only, and they scored them all based on a series of criteria. And the 2 addition renovation options scored high, and new construction scored just a little bit higher. So the repair we have to do, and right now we have to show the state and show you what it would cost us to repair it. But right now they're trying to look for input and decide whether it makes sense to request a new building or an addition renovation. And remember I said how much work has to be done on the existing. If you work with it, you have to do all new roof, you have to do all new exterior skin, you have to do a whole bunch of stuff. The cost really isn't that different. There are some differences, but you'll see. With the repair option, the construction might be 28 to 30 million. These are all based on benchmarks because the state is funding so many different schools. So we have real good data as to what new schools or any kind of school project are costing. But if the construction's 28 or 30, then there's other things on top of that. You know, you have professional services, you have construction contingencies, you have furniture, equipment, technology. So, you know, the project budget, which includes everything kind of turnkey, could be 34 to 37. And at this point, we're assuming that that's 100% town share because it really doesn't address the educational component. The two addition renovations, the comprehensive that brings everything up to the most current, we think it could be $87 to $90 million. And remember I said when we look at new construction, it's really not that different at 88 to 91. Really all we're saving are the foundations and some structural steel. And that, we think the town share could be around 50 million. The way it works is that MSBA, you have a reimbursement rate. So the school building authority will participate in the construction and the outfitting of these projects. We think that the town's share is going to be about 55%, and MSBA's share would be 45%. So even though it's maybe a 90 million project, the cost to Bridgewater would be somewhere around 50 after reimbursement. And then the only other one up here is, this other hybrid addition renovation, which as I mentioned is, $3 or $4 million less expensive, mostly due to structural code changes. So where the committee is now is they're still in the feasibility study. Remember we had talked about October of 18. Well, that was a 4-inch thick binder that we submitted to the MSBA as a group that showed everything we know about the existing building, everything we know about all the various sites, why they want to build on the Mitchell site, why they want it to be a pre-K2 instead of pre-K3. So that submission was made October 31st. We held a couple of these public forums November 1st. We're here November 14th. So we're still in the feasibility study phase. We want to, or they want to, we all want to solicit feedback and figure out what's right for the town. So they're in January after the holidays, we'd like to schedule some more of these because by the end of February, one of these options has to be selected and then submitted again to MSBA with the rationale for why it was selected. At that point, MSBA will take a look at it for a couple months, and then assuming that they agree, which usually they do because there's so much groundwork that's done, their board would say, yes, we agree, go to the next stage and actually do some schematic drawings and some more precise cost estimate work. So the idea is to get into schematic design and submit very detailed cost estimates on what the town wants to do in July, have the board approve it in August, and then it goes up to the town to go through the funding process. And I think that's kind of an overview. I think Will's going to come up and just say hello again.
Say hello, yeah. Okay, so this whole presentation that you saw tonight will be on our website. So if you are not familiar with it, it's www.bridgewaterschoolproject.com. If you did not sign in and give us your email at the front door, if you do that, we will then hook you up with information as it becomes available. We do update our website quite often, but news updates will also be sent out. Let me see if there's anything else. Yes, one very important thing. I would like to invite you to come up and take a look at the 4 different plans that we have here. And we have these wonderful little stickers. And if you just take one sticker and put it on the plan or schematic design that you prefer, that would be awesome. We really want your input. We want to know what the town is thinking, and this is one way for you to do that. At this point, we would like to open up the floor for any questions that people may have. Yes?
Of the options that are available, which provides the quickest turnaround to get students back inside the building?
Luckily, the building's empty. So if a contract's awarded for new construction, it's a quick demolition and you start construction. If it's an addition renovation, it's pretty much the same thing. You just come on site and start working. It's not like you have to do part of the building, move kids out, and do all that. So it's probably, either way, it's going to be about a 24-month, probably at the most, construction sequence.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So, sorry, it's like you're aiming for September of 2022? Is that kind of the goal?
Want to be back?
Go ahead.
Are any one of the designs more amenable to future growth than any of the other designs? Obviously, the building permits keep getting growing, so.
Yeah, I mean, we all like to do new buildings, but I think a new building, you can site it on, the existing building is kind of landlocked where it is, right? And, you know, we know if we do additions, we want to do them out front for the safety and site and circulation issues. Out back, unfortunately, there's not a lot of room before you hit that stream. So, long answer to your question, but a new building will allow a designer to kind of figure out what's the best shape and then actually take part of the site. And MSBA requires this, like, where are you going to put an addition?
Can I ask something along those same lines? Didn't the slide say that the square footage was the smallest in the new construction?
Yeah, the square footage is actually a little bit smaller in the new construction. So remember that the addition renovation and the new construction are almost the same, you know, order of magnitude, they're really the same. The problem with putting an addition and a renovation is that, again, because you're kind of landlocked, you're kind of locked into what was built before, and it might not be the most efficient layout. It might have more corridors, more stairways, you know, just all sorts of things that you might not need if you were starting from scratch and you could really compress things. So typically, it's not just this building. Typically, if you're doing an addition renovation, it's going to end up not a lot, but definitely more square footage on a new building.
Two questions, points. Is there any limitation that you couldn't build on that playground area that bridge the stream and the future growth potential? Lots of places do that. So that's just a question. Right. And I hope the committee would look at that as part of the future. The other thing is, I would be advocating, I'm the chair of the Energy Committee here in Bridgewater, and I would be advocating very strongly that you go and use the most current stretch code in the building, because the energy cost savings you result from that could in fact pay for some of that increased $3 million you talked about.
Yes.
And so that's what I would be advocating for. And why build less than the current in terms of code when this is a 50-year building?
There's no doubt that we will be doing probably just exactly that. Even if we work with the existing shell, we're going to be stripping it down to the steel. We're going to be doing a new air barrier system. R21 insulation. It's going to be a tight building and a very energy efficient building. Every system is going to be new.
Point. I have a meeting with the superintendent in a couple of weeks.
I think we'll be there.
So if I could also, Ms. Carlton, we did look at actually going across the stream. Let's see if I can get this one. The challenge with it was creating a very large corridor for kids to move to, because we couldn't get, as you know, we have to be so many feet to get away from that water. So the corridor was going to be massive. And especially for pre-K 2, we were feeling like that's going to take a half hour to get them to lunch.
No, I hear you, but I think there are options to channelize that and maybe work with people in terms of weapons replication, that kind of thing. So I think to think that you have to have a long bridge may not be the right way to think. It could be minimize building to that bridge and think about how you can manage that stream flow.
Okay. Thank you.
Question.
Whole bunch.
I know we're moving forward and that's great, but have we looked at how the destruction on the roof, and especially the fixes that somebody tried to make to the trusses and they all split or what have you? Is any of that being considered into how we're moving forward with it? It seems like the roof was looked at and somebody tried to fix it and then those broke and then the whole roof collapsed because we got so much snow and nobody cleaned it off.
So if the committee ends up saying that they think an addition and renovation at that building is the best thing, that whole roof's coming off and a new roof's going on. Okay. But I'm not sure if that's your question.
Is there going to be considerable people paying attention to what's going on?
Yes.
It seems like that went on forever and nobody paid attention to it.
So that's what the OPM does for us. When the building was originally built, the standard was there wasn't a required OPM.
Okay.
Now there's an OPM. If you look at the Academy building here in town, we needed to have an OPM for that, and we all know how well that went. Okay. So the OPM is definitely an advocate for us. So that's why we've got Daedalus on board, and they are definitely in our corner. Yeah.
And this MSBA, this is a new authority, within the last, 10 years or whatever. But when there was a hiatus of about, I think, 5 years between when the old funding agency stopped, and then the state said, wait a minute, well, we got to redo this. And this MSBA was put together with a lot of checks and balances and a lot of requirements on the town. So I, just having gone through it for the past 6 or 7 years, I mean, it is so robust as far as the oversight on what option gets selected, what the budget is, and how it's put together when it's constructed.
So we will not have any funding if we just fix it, but we will have funding if we go forward.
That's our opinion. Yeah, that if it's just a repair job, MSBA is really in the business of educational projects, and so the repair really doesn't address the educational program.
Right.
I'm just curious as to where the town is for paying off all the other bonds that have been taken out over the years for fixing the Williams and the Mitchell and the high school and
There is,
there's the library and there's the fire department and the police department and, you know, everything's, not that we didn't need the work, I'm just curious, has anything been paid off and where that's going?
I can't speak to the town projects with the fire.
What about the school project?
School projects, we do have some debt that's coming off the books probably within the next 5 years.
Which ones?
In terms of the projects, I think our roof projects, and I think renovations on, I think the Williams project was back in the early 2000s. And I think also eventually debt on this building as well will be coming off the books. Kathy Macedo, who's our business director, can get that information for you. Maureen, so if you need that, we can put that information up on the website as well.
Yeah, I think that would be important to know, get that out there so people would know what's going to be paid off and how it's going to be paid off.
Great.
Because you talked about another 50 million coming up.
It's done.
To my recollection, in the last 12 to 18 months, there have been 3 major bonds that have been paid off. And but the town manager should provide us that information, absolutely.
Because we can speak to the school side, but the town manager would know more of the municipal side of the town project. So we'll work together with Mr. Dutton and Mr. Macedo and get that information up on the website.
And just real quick, Mr. Dutton does serve on the committee, as does Mr. Fitzgibbons, who's the town councilman. So we have town representation beyond both Lila and I as elected members of town. Tracy, do you have a question?
Oh, I think somebody kind of asked this and we didn't get the full answer to it. Which building would be recommended by you for continued growth within the town and the growth of the student population? Like, it seems like size-wise, are we going to have room for the continued growth that is happening?
Yeah, that falls back on me. I probably got sidetracked.
Yeah.
I would say one of the pros or opportunities when you do a new building is you can plan for future expansion.
Right.
You could even make the cafeteria or the library a little bigger than maybe you need.
So again, you're saying the brand new, not a renovation addition.
Yes, only because with the renovation, I think you're locked into a certain, you're just locked into a shape, you know, and a place on the site.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Over here. Yeah, go ahead.
So are there any advantages to the B1 that costs the same as the new construction?
I think, you know, I don't know what the politics are around, you know, taking down a structure and rebuilding it. I can tell you the economics, and it's not, you know, it is not a lot more expensive to just start from scratch, especially with that building, because you have to do, it's coming down to the steel structure. Everything else is just getting stripped out.
That's why I'm thinking between the two, it seems, if you're looking at those two, it seems like a no-brainer to do new, unless I'm missing something, what there would be an advantage to.
Yeah, so that'll be a judgment that the building committee is looking for feedback, and we'll have to make.
There was a question on this side of the room. I'll come back to this side. Go ahead.
I think the state required that towns use specific architectural designs already approved.
They make a series of plans available. They do not. They don't force towns to do that. Towns actually have to apply and get into that program.
Has that been looked at? To save some architectural fees?
I don't know. I mean, I know all the data, the MSBA has a very robust website, and I don't know if they do 100 schools. I don't know how many are this, you know, model school. Not very many over the past few years, but.
Jean, so that program is called the Model School Program, and until you know what your option is, you can't look at a model school. If you choose like a repair or an addition renovation, you can't do a model school. It's part of the construction. So if new construction is chosen, and at that point, the school building committee wants to talk to the MSBA about model school options, it's at that point that the MSBA may or may not invite the SBC to look closer at those options. Model school is also very, very tight on, because they're already designed, there's no way to, sometimes it's hard to fit it on specific sites. Some sites have elevation issues, wetlands issues, or rock issues. And so not every building can fit on every site. So it depends on what they have available for buildings, but until a preferred scheme is chosen, the MSBA won't even let the school building committee talk about model school.
Hold on one second. Over here.
I just had a question with regard to the cost analysis. The scorecard that was done, was there a risk factor built into salvaging some of the existing building versus new construction?
There was.
So I guess what my point is, there's going to be a certain percentage of the people voting on this that their number one concern is probably going to be the dollars, but salvaging some of the existing structure, is there a risk there to potentially overrun the budget there? I'm of the opinion that knocking the building down and starting new, but I just wanted to ask, what sort of risk factor was carried for the addition?
Yeah. So Christina's firm does professional cost estimating. So Shane, who's not here tonight, who's the lead OPM, definitely went through that analysis. So I know it's priced in as far as contingencies and this project budget. You're going down to the foundation and you're going down to the steel structure. So I don't think you're going to open up a wall and find stuff. I think the risk is that you just can't get your educational program in as efficiently just because you're locked into those structural things, if that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you.
If you do the new build, will the elevation be higher than what's existing?
It might be a little bit higher, but you're kind of locked in. We'd have to work with what's the elevation in South Street and what's the elevation out back. You don't want to really spend a lot of money just on site work. So we try to design a building around what's there.
So maybe 5 feet. I live on South Street,
Okay.
so I'm just curious.
Yeah, so if the existing building stayed, the front of the building would go a little closer to South Street because of the additions. The height, depending what option is chosen, if it's a new building, it might be a little bit higher than what's there. But we can probably come up with an option that's not 3 or 4 stories.
Okay. Thank you.
I guess it kind of goes back to the beginning comments about restructuring grades as well. You mentioned Mr. Gray is talking about all these new students coming in the K through 3. What kind of stress we're looking at with a pre-K through 2 new school or renovation project, and then having additional grades at Williams, which is already stressed?
Well, if you'll go back to that model, you'll go back to 3 grade levels, which is what was originally constructed at the Williams. And then the 3 grade levels at the middle school would be at the former high school site, which when it was originally built had capacity for 1,200 students. With the 3 grade levels there, you're going to be about 750 to maybe 900. So you still even have room to grow out.
Okay, so room to grow in the Williams school and middle school with all this plan. Okay, because it sounded like there was a lot of stress and reconfiguration putting 7th graders back there.
Yeah, well, right now you have 4 grade levels at the Williams. You'd actually be taking a grade level out.
Okay.
You go back to the 3 grade levels that it was currently constructed for, which was currently 4, 5, 6.
Okay.
Now it just becomes.
Question on this side of the room. I saw a hand go up over it out back. If not, I'll go to you, sir, in the back. Yep, and Under Armour.
So I'm currently working in a building where nobody from my profession was consulted on the use of it, and it's kind of a wacky construction for what it's used for. So either to Mr. Swenson or has anyone on your staff or any of the building administrators looked at these plans? And it's, obviously I know nothing about education. So do they have a preference? I know you're looking for our opinions, but is there a preference from your standpoint or your staff standpoint?
Can I start? Sure. So you can see that we've got members of the committee. They're non-voting members, but they're members of the committee. We've got educators on that team. Ms. Ullman is here. She serves on the committee. She's a current teacher. Is Joanne here? There's a contingent of teachers out there on the back. No? Okay. So yeah, to answer the first part of your question, yes. They are looking at it. Obviously, Mr. Swenson's on the team. So Mr. Bray's on it. So yes, educators are looking at it. But to answer the rest of your question, I'll turn it over to the superintendent.
Yeah, thank you.
No problem. Do it again.
And kind of going back to what I talked about, that visioning committee, again, was comprised of educators, community members, and whatnot. And basically, when we took that information, we created our educational profile that was submitted to MSBA. Each of these sites and buildings are conducive to that educational program. New construction, obviously, because you're building from new and you can actually structure it the way you would want, would probably be the most conducive in terms of the implementation of that plan. Right now, we're trying to make it so that this is just solely informational and not trying to lead anybody in any direction. But I guess each of these sites could house that educational program plan. However, new construction, obviously, you're building from scratch, so you can plan it the way you would want, I guess is the most political way.
Let's do, I saw this lady's hand first. Go ahead.
So, I mean, I know that this is focused on the Mitchell, but it ties in with the middle school as well. So once the new Mitchell is built or whatever, so we'll have 6 to 8 back at the middle school, correct?
Yes.
And are there any improvements planned for that building? That the town, you know?
It wouldn't be part of this project. If there weren't going to be any improvements, it would not be reimbursable through MSBA. It would have to be something that was funded by the town itself. Right now, the way the building is structured, I got to tell you right now, that building on 166 Mount Prospect is your best built building in the district. It's like a Sherman tank. I don't think they're going anywhere. That's how they used to build schools in back in the day.
Go on the auditorium.
So, there are some things that, there are things that need to be done, obviously. But in terms of, from a structural standpoint, I mean, the classrooms are already existing. We may have to convert some office space back into classroom space. That might be, short money type projects. But we may look to do some upgrades, but it would not be part of this overall project and reimbursable by the state.
But it would be some things that the town would still have to vote on.
No, that would be more of an internal conversation within the district and maybe meeting with the town and seeing that we get some funding to do some small upgrades.
My daughter will have spent through 3rd grade and then probably 6th through 8th grade in that building, this plan. And it's been completely missed out on.
No, I get you. And that's, that's one of the, downfalls to this situation. We realize that.
Carlton?
I just want to echo a comment up here of having the actual teachers involved in some of the internal design concepts within the building. From personal experience, that doesn't happen. There's a lot of wasted and inappropriate designs. So having the teachers, educators involved heavily in that final outfitting of the rooms is absolutely critical.
And when we actually went to do our site visits, teachers came with us. So we were able to go to those sites that we went throughout the Commonwealth, and one up in Concord, New Hampshire, at the Krista McAuliffe Elementary School. So they were able to see what these new designs are, the breakout spaces, the steam rooms, the maker mark spaces. So all those are the things that we brought back to that educational visioning
To
program.
make it more pointed.
Correct.
Will they be able to interact with the OPM and the architectural team and the construction team?
Well, what they're serving, many are serving on the school building committee. So
That's good, but that's not my question. When you get to the construction phase and the final design phase, will they have some say in the furniture? Will they have some say in the types of equipment you put in? Or is it somebody else going to say, yeah, let's do it this way? And then the people that move in there say, why didn't we do it this way? Why didn't we do it that way? I'm talking about at the final stages.
That's one question. Yes.
Thank you.
Hold on one second, sir. I'm going to go right behind you. Yep.
Question about security. I know you talked about that with the new construction and things like that. Obviously, with the 3 houses, that was kind of everybody, each house having their own entrance and things like that. So with the new construction and the one entrance, so you consulted with Bridgewater Police and Fire and all that for that aspect? Because I know even just here in the high school, having an ID was a huge issue and everybody was all up in arms about carrying an ID with them, but, filtering kids into a new way. Making sure everybody's aware about that
Absolutely.
process.
And I would say that goes to Carlton's point about involving the teachers. We absolutely 100% will involve and have the public safety officials, both fire and police, consulted when we looked at putting a school on this site, as well as over at the Mitchell at the middle of the
Are you going
166.
as far as looking at bulletproof glass? I don't know.
Yeah, we actually have a safety consultant that we're working with, that we actually met with about a week ago, and talk about what are a lot of new innovations in regards to safety. Obviously, society being what it is, school safety and the different innovations become somewhat of a cottage industry, unfortunately, within our country.
And I would think this would be the time to do it, if you were thinking about it.
Absolutely.
Sir.
Two, if I may, what is Maker's Mark space?
Maker Mark spaces, they're rooms that have all of these. A Maker Mark space is just a big open space that has a lot of room for collaboration and project-based, hands-on activities if you saw the one that we saw in New Bedford, you just walk into this big room. It's just a big open space with almost lab tables, and they had all kinds of different projects, and the kids would be given a design that they would have to come up with to solve a problem. And they'd have to use different materials throughout the classroom to create that project to solve that problem. So it's about collaboration, it's about higher order thinking skills, and those types of things right there. So that's a Maker Mark space right there. They actually have, coming down from the ceiling, extension cords that can pull down all throughout. So if you have any type of electrical, laptop type space or any type of machinery that you need to use, it's all part of the STEAM and STEM movement. So that's where we're really kind of going. STEAM and STEM, I keep throwing that out there, is science, technology, engineering, art, and mathematics.
Question 2, all of these proposed solutions involve one building. Has anybody given thought to one structure on one part of town, another structure on another part of town, rather than trying to squeeze 5 pounds of potatoes in a 2-pound lot? You could have half of it here and half of it over there.
You only get one shot at it. The state's not going to reimburse you for 2 spaces.
Why not?
Well, I'm just the education guy.
I'm not really the state guy, but I'm sure a lot of it's controlling. There's a lot of districts that need projects. They also have a limited funding supply. So if you did two schools, you'd end up with building more square footage, developing 2 sites. You'd have 2 kitchens, 2 libraries, 2 gyms. So they worked very hard with the district, and they said, you know, look at a pre-K 3 for 995 pupils, or look at a pre-K 2 for 740 pupils, and that was it. If the town had been invited in to look at 2 schools, that would have been part of the deal, but usually it's one project per district at a time.
When I look at what it costs to bus students for 50 years, all over town, if you cut that expense in half by having two schools, you have to make a lot more walkers. Why doesn't that sort of thing enter into the formula for total cost?
Well, it might, but remember you're building a lot more square footage, so you have operational costs also. So if you're building, I don't know, 200,000 square feet instead of 130,000 square feet, you know, you have so much per square foot for heat and electricity and staff. So there are a lot of operational costs year after year that come with you know, 2 buildings as opposed to 1. Just say, you know, think about 2 cafeteria staffs or 2 librarians, you know, 2 art teachers.
So another.
Did you say that the foundation is in a good shape?
Yes, we.
That's the building. And it's not going to cave in another 50 years or whatever, or?
No, I mean, you know, really the issues involve the roof, the construction of the roof, and the outside cavity. But I do want to say the foundation, we had a structural engineer look at it. There's no signs of settlement. There's no visible cracks that are obvious. We looked at the soils, and based on what was available in 1996, it was built on good soil. But sometime before the end of the month, we're actually going out with boring rigs to do a series of explorations around the perimeter of the school, even a couple inside the school, to just make sure, again, due diligence, that the soils are what we believe they are.
But do you think that should be done, you know, like now, before we do all this work? Because if there is anything wrong with it, then everything will fall apart.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, and we are doing it now, and we're doing it well in advance of when the committee will have to make a decision.
Did you have another question?
Shouldn't mind.
Sure. Anybody else? Any other questions? Yes, Bert.
I'd like to talk about next steps. So the only concerning slide that I saw today is when we talk about the town voting for the funds. So could you just explain that to me? Obviously, you guys will make a recommendation. You'll have a lot of supporters. However, if the town votes no, what does a no vote mean? Does it mean we get 0 schools, period, and we stuck in what we have now? Or does it mean we have to repair, and so for 15 million, we could have had a brand new school?
It means you lose the MSBA funding.
Right, so we
then
have
it
to
would be
spend
100%.
35 anyway.
So it would be on the town of Bridgewater at that point to either repair, or if they wanted to build or put a renovation addition together, but they would have to absorb 100% of the costs.
So the town has, I'm going to say, the authority to say, we don't want to spend $1 on this, the voters, at all.
The voters,
And
yes.
so we can vote no, could mean we want to pay for it ourselves, we don't want free money, or we want our kids to stay in this, you know, sardine situation. So so there isn't anything the government or somebody smarter can come in and say, look, you need a new school, like these are your 2 options. No doesn't mean you don't get a new school, it just means this and that and the other thing. Like, you know what I'm saying? What do we need to do to make sure whatever it is, however, whichever option that we can afford, that we get a new school and we're not sardining these kids? Is there any power above the current power we're looking at?
No, it's a local vote. It's a local decision. So it's up to the voters of the town of Bridgewater to go to the poll.
How do we educate them on what a no vote or a yes vote really means, so they don't think it means no money out of our pocket?
Yeah, I think once we get closer to that, and we have more of these public forums, we'll kind of add, that element to it.
It might be important to start it now so people don't think they just kick it and not worry about it.
So, and I don't disagree with either point. The challenge right now for us as the school building committee is we are strictly giving you all the information. That is the first step for us, is making sure that people in the town know what we've done so far and what the next steps are. We are not advocating one plan over
No,
another.
I'm not talking about the plan, just saying that the yes or no vote, she's saying, yes, we want it, we want to fund it and get help from MSBCA. Or no, and they voted no, and they think we're not getting school, and we're on the hook for the whole thing.
So the way that we are playing out, the way the vote will go is the school building committee will vote the option. It will then go to the school committee, because we as a school building committee are a subcommittee of the school committee. And then it will go to the town of Bridgewater Town Council to be placed on a ballot sometime in the fall. It's at that point that you're actually voting yes or no on whatever option is decided. So I agree with you, it's yes or no, but before knowing what the yes is, I think we're going to have a problem with some folks in town saying a yes vote will get you a new school. It may not be a new school. It might be a ad reno. So we have to be careful about what we tell people and how we say it. That's all. That's
as long as they understand the yes means we get help from MS.
Correct. MSBA.
And no means we're on hook for the whole thing. That's the important part that they need to do.
Right. And the other piece of the no vote is, and again, take my school committee hat off and put on my taxpayer hat. It doesn't mean we do anything. A no vote could mean we do nothing and we stay in the current situation we're in for the long term. So we just want to be careful about.
So we do 2 votes?
So the current Mitchell, shouldn't say the current Mitchell, 500 South Street. I've only been in town for 8 years. Apparently that building took 9 votes before it passed to get that building done. 9? Early?
I was going to say, I think this building, took us 4 votes.
Right. So.
And the South Road was, I guess what I would try to say, living through all that, there are probably some other people here who lived through all that. It was absolutely horrible. And it was very, very, very hard on our town and our school system. I had 4 kids in school at that point in time. None of them ever got to see any of the new schools. And it was a literal war. People hated each other. Friendships were lost over it. I just encourage us to do whatever we can to do the best for our children and the best for our community, and to not divide us so that we're school and town, and we put up a big barrier and just destroy each other all over again. We've done a great job, I think, in the last few years since this building was built. And that's more than 2 years. I mean, that's a lot. In some people's estimation, it seems like a few to really be a united community, right? 2 united municipalities. And I don't really know how to do that, except I just encourage everybody here tonight to do their best. When you see somebody who really opposes it, to try to sit and listen to what they have to say, what are their concerns, answer their concerns. When you hear somebody who's really pro build a brand new one and I don't want any reconstruction, hear what they have to say and try to find a way that we can make it through all this without harming each other. And our kids are who get harmed by it. So that's trite, but that's all I got to say.
Thanks, So once an option is chosen, is there a plan to communicate to the town a yes and a no?
100%, there will be. So
that's my question.
You'll notice on this timeline, we're going to be doing more of these after the holidays in January, so invite more of your friends to come with you. We will continue to hold these throughout. This by no means is we get through this phase and we're done. There's a not a subcommittee, but a working group, a communications working group that meets regularly, that puts these things together, makes sure that we are getting that information out to folks. Again, we just want to be, to Marilee's point, we don't want to be divisive. We don't want to divide the town. We want to make sure we are giving all of the information out that we can, and it's that the town, come the fall, votes the way the town votes.
And just to make the point, I have no idea how in 4 days you went from 4 schools to 3 schools. I would say that's like trying to hold the ocean back with a broom, and a no vote and to stay stagnant would be very detrimental to every kid in this town. And teachers, staff, all the way up to the superintendent. So, again, back to my original piece. How you people communicated, I give you all the credit in the world, because that is the most important piece moving forward.
Yes, Melissa.
We need to go through and have everyone raise their hands how they found out about the meeting tonight.
Yeah, we can do that. So if you found out about this meeting through Facebook, can we just show of hands? Okay. If you found out, hold on one second, leave your hands up so Christina will just do a quick number count. 15. Found out through a flyer in your child's mailbox, or your child, grandchild, some child you know, their folder from home, from school.
Your backpack.
Yeah, thank you, that thing. That thing, not their briefcase, sorry. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Let's see how else. Facebook? Email. That's all right. You got the message twice.
Yes.
And then through our school building committee website. Oops, that. Anybody find out that way? It's okay. That's good. That's good feedback for us. So we know we need to do a better job about getting that website out there. It is out there. We encourage you to visit it. All of the meetings we've had have been public meetings. You are entitled as taxpayers, as members of the public, to come to those. They are open meetings. They are posted meetings. We have spots in those during those meetings for public comment. All of that information is on that site. Our minutes, our agendas, our presentations that we've seen. This presentation, the presentation that RDA gave to the school committee back in 2016 when they were hired to do that forensics analysis, that's on this website. Many people have seen that already because it's from 2016 and we sort of threw it out to everybody when it first came out. All of that information is on this website. The town's website, the district's website, BTV, the library, all link to it. So if you don't remember what it is, go to the town's website, go to the district website, and you will be brought right to our page. We did that intentionally. We didn't want people to have to click too far. Yes?
Just a quick question for our elderly community. Facebook, email, kids' backpacks might not be the best option, so maybe we can think something outside the box because I remember when we first did this, the last vote, there were so many folks that just didn't get the message and didn't know about these meetings, and I think it's great having evening meetings for all of us that work and having base downstairs and everything, I think is huge. But if we don't tap into the knowledge and the passion of our elderly community, we're going to fall flat on our face.
Absolutely. We've had 2 during the day meetings already.
Yeah.
Earlier this month, we do send regular communications through Mr. Swenson to the senior center.
Okay.
And that information goes out in their newsletter. So thank you for reminding me. Did anybody find out through the senior center or the senior center newsletter? Okay. Just curious. Thank
Okay.
you for asking that. That reminded me of another. So we posted this in shops throughout town too. We had the half sheet at the Better Bean, at Roach Brothers, the Juice Mill. So we are trying to get it out there as much as possible. And we know people that don't live in town go to those places, but we also know that the vast majority of people who visit those shops are Bridgewater residents.
I do send out a weekly newsletter that I email, and I always put an MSBA update in that as well. And that goes to your inbox email on Fridays.
Yeah.
In the timeline, when does the committee select an option that, was it on there? Then basically, when does the committee vote on which direction would go on the,
So, go ahead, Sid. Go ahead, Jim. I don't need to repeat. I don't want this to be Pete repeating.
I'm not really great with specific dates, but kind of mid to late January, if we're going to submit our package to the state in February, we need a few weeks to put it together after the selection is made.
So it's coming pretty quick.
Yeah, it's coming pretty quick. So February 20th is when the committee would be submitting this is what we want to build to the state. So that kind of puts us back into the end of January.
What is the committee basing their decision on for one of these plans? Is it like our comments from these meetings, or what else is going in behind it?
So, yeah, we're taking into consideration all of the comments we'll get here tonight, the two previous meetings, the information that we are shared with us during our public meetings, and we'll make a decision from there. So we really do, and when we say it's a public meeting, we really want people to come to those, to hear what we're hearing as members of the school building. We can regurgitate it back to you if you want, but it's better to hear it straight from, excuse the phrase, the horse's mouth, than have the school building committee sort of go through it. So there are, and then we'll look at what MSBA is also coming back with. We have to play in the sandbox. If we want to use their funding, we've got to make sure we are dotting our I's, crossing our T's, and doing exactly what they require.
And at each meeting, school building committee meeting, Jean presents and so does Shane, giving us updates on what they've been working on. So at that school building committee, we get updates from the two of them saying what they've been working on, where they're going next. They answer any questions we may have or any suggestions that we may have. They may go back and look at something that we suggest. So it's a really great opportunity, again, for the community to come and be part of the process.
And we have working meetings every Wednesday, myself with Daedalus and RDA. We talk about next steps and where we are in terms of, from my angle of the educational program, space summaries that we give, Jean gives us updates on. So it's a constant process that's been going on. And I know this is new to everybody here, but we've had close to 15, 16 school building committee meetings over time. So this is not something that, has just been kind of put together in the last month. This has been going on since July of 17. So again, as Mr. Dolan said, those meetings are open to the public. We invite you in because there's a lot of good information that you'll get there over time rather than hearing it. I know it's a lot to absorb in one night to hear all this information. But again, we invite you into those meetings. They're at the Academy building. The next one is November 26th, 6:30 at the Academy building, which is the Monday after Thanksgiving break. So feel free to please come in. And then at that point, at the end of the meeting, we always set the next meeting date. So you'll always have an understanding when the next meeting date's coming in as well.
Any other questions? So before you leave, come down, put a sticker, please, only one sticker. Just one per person. I know some of you will be coming. Thank you all for coming.